She came from a small, working-class neighborhood where survival had always been a struggle. But here, in this mansion, she saw an opportunity for a new life. A life where her beauty and intelligence could help her rise above the limits placed on her by society. She had been hired as a maid, a position that many would consider beneath them, but Jasmine knew better. She had spent years perfecting her ability to read people, to understand their desires, and to use that knowledge to her advantage. The Montgomery mansion was the perfect stage for her to set her plan into motion. Charles Montgomery, the elderly black man who owned the mansion, was a wealthy real estate mogul. His wife, Amelia, a once beautiful woman, was now bedridden, slowly withering away from a long illness. Their love had once been deep and full of life, but now, Amelia's frailty cast a heavy shadow over their marriage. Jasmine observed this from the moment she arrived. She could see the distance between Charles and Amelia, a distance that had grown wider with time and illness. Charles, despite his wealth and power, was clearly lonely. His once vibrant presence had diminished, replaced by the quiet sadness of a man watching his life slip away. Jasmine recognized the vulnerability in Charles's eyes and knew that this weakness was her entry point. She was determined to make herself invaluable to him, and in doing so, she would weave a web that would change everything. The mansion, which had once seemed like a prison for Jasmine, was now her chance for power. Jasmine knew that in order to rise above her station, she needed to move carefully, like a spider weaving a web. She began to observe Charles more closely, his habits, his likes, and his needs. As the days passed, she made small, deliberate adjustments to her behavior and appearance, all with one goal in mind: to gain his attention and trust. At first, she wore her maid's uniform with precision, always maintaining professionalism. But as time went on, Jasmine started to wear a slightly more elegant version of the outfit, ensuring that it complemented her figure without appearing too bold. She kept her hair neatly styled in a bun, but would occasionally let a few curls fall loosely to frame her face. Her medium brown skin, which had initially blended into the background of the mansion, now seemed to shine under the soft lighting, catching Charles's gaze more often. Every small act, every glance, every smile was calculated. When she served him meals, Jasmine would linger just a little longer than necessary, offering him her full attention. She would ask about his day, listening intently as he spoke of his past triumphs and present regrets. Her voice was soft and comforting, never too eager but always present. Jasmine made sure that she never seemed too forward. Instead, she was simply the attentive maid who was always there when he needed someone. Charles, at first, didn't realize what was happening. He was used to the quiet of the mansion, the way things had always been. But slowly, he began to notice Jasmine in a way he hadn't before. Her presence, once a mere background detail, became an anchor for him. He found himself looking forward to their interactions, to the moments when she would appear, bringing with her the warmth and care that had been missing from his life for so long. Jasmine had not only gained his attention, she had begun to fill a void within him, one that he had long buried under the weight of his responsibilities and his grief over Amelia. And this was just the beginning of her plan. She was playing the long game, but every move she made was pushing her closer to her goal, Charles Montgomery's heart. Weeks had passed since Jasmine began to subtly weave her influence over Charles, and she could feel the power shifting in her favor. Each day, she carefully positioned herself in his life, always close enough to offer a comforting word, but distant enough to remain an enigma. Charles, despite his age and previous loyalty to his wife, began to seek out her presence more and more. One evening, as the mansion fell silent under the weight of a setting sun, Jasmine saw her chance. Amelia had retired to her room, the faint sounds of her cough echoing from upstairs. Charles sat alone in the study, his weary eyes fixed on the fire. His posture, once strong and commanding, had begun to sag with age and grief. This was the moment Jasmine had been preparing for. She entered the study quietly, her movements graceful as she made her way toward him. "Mr. Montgomery," Jasmine said softly, her voice low and inviting, "you've been so strong for so long, but you don't have to do it alone anymore." She placed a tray with a glass of whiskey on the table beside him. Her medium brown skin glowed under the soft light of the fire, and her long, dark curls cascaded over her shoulder, framing her face in a way that made her seem both approachable and mysterious. Charles looked up at her, his eyes tired but drawn to her presence. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Jasmine," he confessed, his voice cracking. "Amelia, she's fading. I don't know how much longer I can keep up the facade." There was vulnerability in his voice, something raw and honest. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to speak the truth of his heart. Jasmine sat beside him, leaning in just enough for him to feel her warmth. "You don't have to suffer in silence," she whispered. Her hand brushed his gently as she poured him a drink. "You deserve someone who makes you feel alive again, Charles." The weight of her words hung in the air, and for a moment, there was no sound but the crackling of the fire. Jasmine's touch lingered just long enough for Charles to feel the pull of her. He turned toward her, his hand trembling slightly as he placed it over hers. "Naomi," he murmured, her name falling from his lips like a prayer. The desperation in his voice was clear. He had fallen under her spell, and she knew it. Jasmine's smile was soft, but it held an undeniable edge. She leaned in closer, her lips barely grazing his ear. "You deserve to be happy again, Charles. I can make that happen." And just like that, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Jasmine had him exactly where she wanted him. The old man, lonely and grief-stricken, had succumbed to the warmth of her touch, the tenderness of her words. His heart, so long closed off, had been cracked open by the subtle manipulation she had so carefully crafted. He kissed her then, his lips desperate, and for the first time in months he felt alive. Jasmine's heart raced, but it wasn't love she felt, it was power. She had succeeded in turning his grief into desire, his loneliness into something she could control. In that moment, she realized that her hold over him was complete, and from this point onward, she could shape his world however she chose. But as she kissed him back, she knew that this was just the beginning. The game had only just begun, and she was ready to win. As the days turned into weeks, Jasmine's hold over Charles Montgomery grew stronger. She had successfully planted herself in the center of his life, and now, with the soft touch of manipulation and affection, she had become irreplaceable. Charles, in his loneliness and grief, had become completely enmeshed in her web. He would seek her out for every little need, whether it was for a comforting word or just the presence of someone who truly cared. But Jasmine knew it was no longer just about comforting him. It was about control. Now that she had Charles's love and devotion, Jasmine began to realize the full extent of the power she wielded. Amelia, once the beloved queen of the household, had been reduced to a sickly figure, barely able to leave her room. The love that Charles had once reserved solely for her was now divided, tainted by his newfound affection for Jasmine. But Jasmine didn't feel the least bit guilty. In fact, she relished in it. Amelia's fragility had created the perfect opening for her to slide in and fill the role that once belonged to the sickly woman. Charles's devotion to Jasmine became almost obsessive. He would spend hours in her company, talking to her, pouring his heart out in a way that he never had with Amelia. But Jasmine knew that her power didn't lie just in being his confidant. It lay in her ability to control everything around her. She made sure that Amelia felt increasingly isolated, delegating even the smallest of tasks to the other maids, who were already starting to feel the oppressive weight of Jasmine's authority. No one was allowed to get too close to Charles except for her. She would stare at the other maids with cold, calculating eyes, daring anyone to challenge her. She made their lives miserable. Longer hours, harsh commands, and belittling remarks became the norm. Jasmine had no use for kindness anymore. Power, after all, was about making others bend to your will. And with each passing day, she saw them bow their heads lower, their spirits breaking just a little more. Jasmine's cruel reign was becoming more apparent as she shifted her attention toward the grand mansion. It had now become her stage, her domain, where every decision, every interaction was in her control. Amelia, too weak to notice, remained upstairs, unaware of the shifting tides below. Jasmine was in charge now, and she made sure everyone knew it. Her once soft demeanor had hardened, and the people who once saw her as a servant now feared her. She was no longer just the maid. She was the mistress of the house, and she would rule with an iron fist. She knew that she was playing a dangerous game, one that would leave nothing untouched. The respect and affection Charles had for Amelia were fading, and with it, so was his loyalty. Jasmine had accomplished what she had set out to do. She had taken everything that once belonged to Amelia, and now, in this grand mansion, there was no one left to challenge her. She sat in the highest chair, looking down at the house she had conquered, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. In the shadows of the mansion, where everything seemed calm and controlled, Jasmine felt a sense of victory, knowing that the poison she had planted was slowly taking root in the hearts of everyone around her. She had become the queen of the house, and with that power came something much darker: the realization that no one, not even Charles, could ever truly love her. She had stolen his heart, but in doing so, she had lost her own. Jasmine had achieved everything she had set out to do. The mansion was now hers to command, and Charles was fully under her spell. His love for her had deepened with each passing day, a love that was blind and all-consuming. He no longer noticed the frailty of Amelia, nor did he seem to care about the life they had once shared. Jasmine had carefully manipulated him into thinking that she was his savior, the woman who could bring light back into his life. But deep inside, she knew that she had trapped him, and in doing so had trapped herself in a cycle of power, control, and isolation. The mansion, which had once felt like a dream to Jasmine, now felt cold and empty. She had everything she wanted: wealth, status, and the love of a man who was willing to give her the world. But as the days dragged on, she found herself wondering if it was worth it. The power she had gained came with a price that she hadn't fully understood until now. She had replaced Amelia, taken her place in Charles's life, but at what cost? Every glance from Charles, every word of affection, now felt hollow. She had manipulated him, used his loneliness and grief to create a bond that was based on deceit rather than true connection. Jasmine realized, with growing unease, that she had become a part of the very system that she had once wanted to escape. She had used her beauty and charm to climb to the top, but now she was stuck in a gilded cage of her own making. Her cruelty toward the other maids, once a way of asserting her power, now weighed heavily on her conscience. She had destroyed their spirits, crushed them under the weight of her dominance. Jasmine's once pure desire for a better life had now become a bitter reminder of the cost of ambition. She had achieved everything she wanted, but the price had been far greater than she had ever imagined. One night, as she sat alone in the grand dining room, the sound of Charles's footsteps echoing from the hallway, Jasmine finally realized the truth. She had won the game, but she had lost herself in the process. The mansion, once a symbol of her victory, now felt like a prison. She had captured Charles's heart, but it was a heart that could never truly be hers. In that moment of realization, Jasmine understood that the power she had so carefully manipulated was nothing more than an illusion. She had become the very thing she had once despised, the woman who used love to manipulate, to control, and to destroy. The mansion, filled with echoes of her triumph, now felt like a hollow victory. And as she looked around the empty halls, she knew that the price of power had been her humanity. The game was over, but the emptiness remained, and Jasmine was left to live with the bitter truth. She had everything she wanted, but in the end, it was nothing more than a fleeting moment of hollow success.